The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Weekly Forecast.
Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for December 20th through the 24th of 2021. Okay, we'll start off with a Euro-USD pair. This is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this price action right here is very strong short, and this move still having a ways to go, in the long term I'm short biased. Right back down to this pivot low right here. However, because of a breakout of this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, and that breakout being right here, in the medium term, I'm long biased. Right back up to this pivot high right here. And finally on the daily chart, since there was a long trade that formed and a short trade that formed, and for the time being the lower confirmation is confirming that the short trade is stronger, in the short term, I am short biased, right back down to this pivot low right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. For a full explanation of what's been happening to price in this entire area right here, please refer to the weekly forecast from 2 weeks ago. Okay, but recently, the last major bias that formed on this weekly chart was short, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low right here before reaching this pivot high. And so if you recall, I took a short entry at 1.2250 right here and another one at 121.30 right here, with both stop losses at this pivot high right here and the main target being right down here. And so as price came down to these levels, there was a nice 4-hour fake HNS that formed in this area, which was a nice setup for an intraday short trade, and moreover to partially extend part of that position to lower levels. And then as price came down to this point right here, if you recall, I took out 90% of both positions roughly in this area due to overall trade management reasons. And then that main target was hit the following week. And even as this main target was hit and price pulled back in these areas, if you recall, there were no signs on the lower time frames of strong long strength. And so I kept 10% of both short positions in to see if we could get to lower levels. And as price came down to this level again, the same thing happened. As we got a pullback, there were no signs of lower time frame long strength, and so still I kept 10% of both those short positions in all the way down to these levels. Now if you recall, I was planning to take another 5% out of both positions at a monthly trend line level that's about 15 pips from this low, which it did not hit. But for the time being, since there doesn't seem to be any long strength on the lower time frames, again I'm seeing a price could reach that monthly trend line level at this level to take out another 5% of both positions. Alright, so first of all, let me show you that monthly trend line level I'm talking about right here, as well as some strong levels I'm looking at on the monthly chart. So let's go over the monthly chart. Okay, so on this monthly chart, that trend line where I'm willing to take another 5% out of the short positions is this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now for the time being, price can reach this trend line right here, which is likely to be a point where long strength is created due to this clean breakout this level right here. Okay, and moreover, there are a couple gap levels that I'm looking at also, so let me show you those. Let me just zoom in here. Okay, so again, that first point that's providing long strength is that monthly trend line right here. And moreover, we have a medium gap that's right here. Alright, so let me show you the levels for that. Okay, so the upper end would be 1.1341, and the lower end is 1.1276. Okay, so in the near future, the 2 points I'm looking at that provide strong long strength are these two elements. Okay, moreover, there's some interesting setups that formed on the daily chart in this area, which is providing a daily short bias for the time being. So let me go ahead and explain that to you. Let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, and if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of legitimate trend lines and gaps and whatnot, please watch my price action trading course. For that course is designed to provide you the necessary information so you can understand these forecasts. Okay, so first of all, at this point right here, there was a strong daily long trade that formed, then a weak short trade that formed right here. So at this point, typically the bias will be long. or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. However, on the lower time frames, there was conflicting lower confirmation of this long strength, which made it extremely difficult to take a long entry on this pullback down. So first of all, let me go ahead and show you this lower time frame confirmation I'm talking about. Let's go over to the 1 hour chart. Okay, so on this 1 hour chart, that daily bias was stating that price is likely to reach this pivot high right here before reaching this pivot low. Now, in terms of lower time frame confirmation, as you guys know, I always talk about price patterns for lower time frame confirmation, but there is another type of confirmation method, and that is trendline breakout. So for example, this obvious trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, you can see it was broken out on this first candle right here, and there was an immediate recovery right back into this trend line after that. Now, it's very important that when this breakout occurs, this recovery has to be very acute, or in other words, this close and this open is at the same price. So it gives the impression that this trend line breakout to the short side was a fake because of the acuteness of this pullback right back in. Okay, so at a basic level, in terms of lower time frame confirmation, this situation right here is mandatory. And then after that, the second part of this lower time frame confirmation demands or requires price to at least reach the last major pivot on that same time frame, which is right here. However, as you can see, although I got the acute breakout back in, I did not get that secondary confirmation of a price run to the last major pivot high. So at this point, since that daily bias was stating that it was long, however, this lower confirmation did not confirm the daily long bias. Okay, and moreover, there was also a price pattern that formed in this area also that did not confirm this daily long bias. So what happened here was that there was a fake double bottom that formed. Now, fake double bottoms show short-term, short strength, or in other words, price should not reach its target height level before reaching its second dip's stop loss level. Now, if this daily long bias was in fact true, price should ignore this short-term short strength that this fake double bottom is providing and actually reach its target height level before reaching the stop loss level on the second dip. However, price actually went about half its height target level, but failed to reach it and came right back down to hit that stop loss level on the second dip. Okay, so at this point, that daily bias that stated price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low was not confirmed by two lower time frame confirmations. Now, one is that trend line breakout level right here, and moreover that fake double bottom on the 5-minute chart that formed right here. Okay, and then soon after, there was actually another daily long trade that formed a couple of days ago. So let me go ahead and show you that. Let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so on this daily chart, that first long trade formed here, and then was a weak short trade that formed right here. And then lower time frames did not confirm that long bias in these areas. And then a couple of days ago, there was actually another daily long trade that formed right here. However, in this case, this daily long trade was weaker than the last daily short trade. So at this point, the daily bias became short, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low right here before reaching this pivot high. And for the time being, the lower time frame confirmation is confirming this. So it seems price should reach this pivot low right here before reaching this pivot high. Now that said, due to it being the month of December when trading liquidity is low and price does tend to range in these type of illiquid times, I will not be trading these types of daily biases for the time being and focus more on higher time frame biases. Okay, so let me just sum this up for you on the weekly chart. Okay, so again on this weekly chart, that last weekly bias stated that price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And recall, like I stated in previous forecasts, this entire move down really didn't have any type of entry setups on the lower time frames aside from intraday price pattern setups on the lower time frames. And moreover, again, as price was pulling back in this area, there are no other signs of lower time frame long strength. So I'm still willing to keep 10% of both those short positions until price reaches that monthly trend line. That's about 15 pips lower than this pivot low right here. However, when price reaches that trend line level, due to it being a relatively strong level that provides long strength, there is a good possibility that on this weekly chart, we may start to begin to have long strength coming back in. And if this does form, then I'll wait for another weekly short trade to form so I could gauge the strength of the longs against the shorts and then decide this weekly bias again. Okay, all right, let's go on to the pound dollar. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this horizontal level right here that's attached to this pivot right here just became legitimate with this 3 touches with 1, 2, and 3 right here, and since price has a tendency to want to test strong levels, in the long term I'm long biased right back up to this horizontal level right here. And moreover, on the weekly chart, since there was a weak short trade that formed here, then a strong long trade that formed right here. However, there's a possibility that this long trade already hit its target at this level, and I'm waiting for lower time frame confirmation. In the short term, I'm neutral biased. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. For a full explanation of what's been happening in the price in this area right here, please refer to the weekly forecast from 2 weeks ago. Alright, but the last setup that formed on this weekly chart was that there was a weak short trade that formed right here. Then a strong long trade formed right here. So at this point, the bias should be long, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And so as price pulled back in this area right here, I would have been willing to take a long entry even in these illiquid times simply because this is a weekly bias. However, there was conflicting lower time frame confirmation of this long bias. So I did not take this long entry. And moreover, as price reached this level right here, price possibly reached a strong monthly gap level that runs right through this level that could be a target for this last long trade. And so at this point, I'm again waiting for lower confirmation to tell me whether this long trade did in fact hit its target at this monthly gap level right here. Okay, so before I go into depth about this weekly bias on the lower time frames, let me just go ahead and show you this monthly gap level I'm talking about, as well as other strong levels that are close to current price. So let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so on this monthly chart, basically the strong levels that are providing strength in both directions are these gaps right here. So this first gap on this upper end is right here. So the upper level is 1.3404 and the lower level will be 1.3368. And more of these lower gap levels right here. So let me show you this top one first. The upper level will be 1.3265 and the lower end will be 1.3239. And more with this lower gap, the higher level is at 1.3210 and the lower level will be 1.3175. Alright, so these 3 gap levels on both ends are the strong levels that is providing short strength and moreover long strength on these. Alright, so now let me show you what's happening on the lower confirmations for that weekly buy. So let's go over to the 1 hour chart. Okay, so on this 1 hour chart, fundamentally that weekly bias was stating that price is likely to reach that last weekly short trade's pivot high, which is way up at higher levels beyond this chart, before reaching this pivot low right here. Now in regards to lower time frame confirmation, like I showed you on that Euro-USD chart, was that there was the trendline breakout confirmation that formed right here. So as you can see this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. It was broken out, then acutely recovered, and moreover reached the last major prior pivot high, which is at this level right here. Now this is lower time frame confirmation because this shows short-term long strength. And so typically as price pulled back in these areas right here, close to that main stop loss level right here, I would have taken a long entry. However, at this point right here, there was a fake double top on the 5-minute chart that formed, which actually did not confirm this weekly long bias. Now, if you don't know how to confirm biases on the lower time frames, please watch the lesson confirming trend on the lower time frames. Okay, so because this confirmation right here confirmed the long bias, however on this point right here, price did not confirm the long bias. As price pulled back in these areas right here, I did not take this long trade. Now this type of conflicting confirmation on the lower time frames often happens in illiquid times, so it does make sense for this type of confirmations to form due to it being the month of December. Okay, and moreover, like I mentioned earlier, there is a possibility that that weekly long trade did hit its main target at that monthly gap level I showed you earlier at these levels right here. So at this point, in order to confirm that weekly bias, whether long or short, I'm going to have to be looking at these lower time frame confirmations again, just like I did in this area right here. And again, if I do get conflicting lower confirmations, I will not be taking any entries, whether short or long, for the time being. Alright, so let me just sum this up for you on the weekly chart. Alright, again, so on this weekly chart, at a basic level, since this short trade is weaker than this long trade, the basic bias is long, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. However, there was no lower time frame confirmation of this long bias. Price gave a nice pullback and came right back up to these levels right here at a level where this long trade may have hit its target at that monthly gap level. Now, if this gap level was a target for this weekly long trade, then at that point the bias will be short, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low right here before reaching this pivot high. Okay, so the direction of this weekly bias is really dependent on the lower time frames price action at this point. Now, just recall, there is also the possibility to get conflicting lower confirmations like I did in this area due to the illiquid markets, in which case, if that happens, I will not be taking any long trades or short trades for the time being. Alright, so that's it for the weekly forecast. I hope you guys have a great week, and thanks for watching. Okay, bye.